My name is Neal. I'm a former beat writer covering the Twins for since 1998. So do the math there. And in 2021, I became a columnist. So I am now covering about everything, but baseball is still near and dear to my heart. So when I had the opportunity to have this man up on stage to talk about what's going on with the Twins, I jump at it. Please, a warm round of applause for President of Baseball Operations for the Minnesota Twins, Derek Falvey.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get down to it. You guys had a 4-3 road trip. You just dropped 2 out of 3 to St. Louis. The common thread among those games is that there were some crushing defeats along the way.
Yeah.
How do you assess what's gone on in the last couple of weeks, and how do you think the guys are handling what's been going on?
Yeah, Lavelle, appreciate the question, because I think it's exactly how our guys feel, right? When you're going through tough runs and you're in a tough group of games, ultimately it's how you respond to those that matters. That's what we try and tell our players all the time. It's not about the adversity you face. The benefit of playing good baseball and playing tight baseball games is you're going to lose some that really are crushing.
Right.
Sometimes when you lose that 8-run game, not that you don't want to, but it's a different kind of game. You kind of know in the 7th inning you're just having one of those nights. When you lose one late in the 9th, it's tough. Our guys all year long, going back to April, I remember when we were going through a tough stretch where we ultimately we were actually in a much worse spot. We had just lost, got swept in Baltimore, had some struggles coming out of it. Showing our guys how to show up every day and making sure that they responded the way we hoped they would was critical. And I think that even through this stretch, 4-3 through that stretch, we lost 2 or 3 at home. We're right in that mix. And as long as we're in that mix right now, late in August, and our guys keep showing up, playing the game of baseball the way we know they can, we're going to be okay.
The pitch has been up and down, but I want to kind of focus on the young guns that you're relying on down here. Zebby yesterday stepped up big time. Got a lot of strikeouts early.
Yep.
He really fills up the strike zone. He has been as advertised. What did you think about his outing yesterday?
Yeah, I think what's been fun, along with being in playoff position and having a good season overall, is that you ultimately are watching some young kids that are going to be a part of this for a really long time start to emerge. And I think that when I look at Zebby, he's a great example of a young kid who's come through our development system and developed in a way that I think is exactly what we want a guy to develop like. Mm-hmm. He continues to throw strikes. He continues to develop his secondary pitches, his breaking balls, all kinds of aspects of what he does on the field. But he's also a tremendous kid off the field and a hard worker and continuing to get better. So when you look at him and Simeon and David Festa and even guys like Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan that are still young and a part of this for a while, watching Pablo Lopez do his thing every night, it's just good to see there's a bright future ahead for a lot of these guys.
You learn more about these guys when they're thrown into the spotlight here in the pennant race?
Yeah, you definitely do. I mean, I think when you bring a young kid up, they can't feel their legs for the first, 2-3 innings of their first game. That's a fact. They say that all the time. But then you get more comfortable. Then you go through a little bit of hitters reacting to what you're trying to do. Right. And then you have to adjust and adapt back. So they're all going through that right now. David Festa is going through a version of that where he knows he needs to land his breaking ball consistently, get ahead of hitters, and then ultimately let his stuff play when he's ahead in the count. Zebby's going to go through that same experience too.
I'm glad you brought that up, because just from watching young pitchers through the years, it seems like you can't get an idea of what they can do until they get 2 or 3 starts in.
Yep.
They get comfortable, and you start seeing how good their stuff is.
Yep.
And a better command. Is that pretty much on the mark there?
Yeah, the first start is you just chalk it up to you can't even feel yourself. You're going through the start. You're having fun out there. It's great. And then those second, third starts, you start to get into a routine. Maybe you come off the euphoria of being called up to the big leagues, and then you settle in just like you did at every other level in the minor leagues. And I think that we're seeing that with each of these guys. Simeon's a great example. He's gone through those ups and downs. He's experienced what it's like to go back to AAA to struggle and then come back and now set forth a really good season. So I think those are the things that you're always looking for.
All right. This division's been rather fascinating this year. I think we knew that Cleveland was going to be a number 1 challenger to you guys, and they have been for the most part. I don't think we anticipated them playing 600 baseball for as long as they did, or their offense as being as a little bit better than I think we projected. Naylor's providing power. Stephen Kwan, I forgot he was at Oregon State with all those guys with Rushman, and that's ridiculous.
Yep, Larnach had some history there too.
Yeah. Yep. And we knew the bullpen was going to be good, and it's been as advertised, although I think they're showing signs of fatigue a little bit. The Royals have kind of come out of nowhere. Yeah, I think. Bobby Witt Jr., I still think should be in the conversation for MVP.
I agree.
My Yankee friends, they're like, no, if Judge has 51 home runs, who's Bobby Witt? And but He's put that team in his back. Their starting pitch has been way better than we anticipated with Seth Lugo and those guys. How has the division played out in your eyes, and what team's a better matchup for you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, the one thing, going back to spring training, I agree with everything you just said. We knew Bobby Witt was a good young player and establishing himself. We thought Seth Lugo, those guys were good pitchers. I think if we had said in March that we thought the Royals were going to be right in the mix and Cleveland was going to be there too, I think everyone would have laughed at us. But the AL Central has been one of the better divisions in all of baseball this year, and I think that's a fact. You can't really debate that. I mean, the three teams all right now in playoff position, Cleveland, us, and Kansas City. So when you look at it, I think we always expected those teams to be good. I also thought Detroit, you know, they're young. They've gone through some ups and downs. They've dealt with some injuries, hasn't gone as well. And we know the White Sox are rebuilding. We get that. They're on that end of the spectrum. But this is not a, you know, middle of the country. Sometimes we get overlooked. This is not a division to overlook. And, you know, like you said, he's been just as good as Aaron Judge and in the MVP conversation. So it's not a fluke. These three teams are good teams. We're going to have to battle right to the end. And you may see three AL Central teams in the mix right at the end in playoff position. I could definitely see that happening.
Speaking of seeing things, we've only seen Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, and Carlos Correa on the field 17 games this year. That's it.
Together.
Together. That's rather remarkable. Are we going to see that happen before the regular season's over?
Yeah, fingers crossed and pray to whatever baseball god you pray to that we do. No, I think we will. I do believe we will, because none of the guys are dealing with things that we think are ultimately going to shut down their seasons, right? So in Royce's case, he's back, and we're happy to see that. Right. He's going through his ups and downs, you know, like any young player will. Byron's tracking in a better direction by the day. We felt this was something that, you know, we know Byron's history here, right? Through the ups and downs, having long time off. We've tried to get ahead of some things when he's a little bit sore rather than have that turn into a bigger issue. So we hope we got ahead of this in a way where he's tracking back and doing work on the field. And then, you know, the third guy in Carlos Correa, plantar fasciitis, for anyone who's had it or knows anyone who's had it, there's not a perfect solution. There's not some go do this surgery and everything's going to work out on the back end. It's unfortunate. He continues to work to try and figure it out. We've explored just about every therapy you could probably explore. Obviously, Mayo Clinic and the folks involved down there to give us some feedback and some ideas. He is tracking in a better direction by the day. It's just taking a lot longer than, you know, ideal. And so hopefully we can get him back going in a good direction this week and see where we're at by the weekend.
It is down to just one spot in his heel, right, that he's dealing with when he runs in cleats?
Yeah, we've improved it for sure. When he went on the IL originally, it really was painful to swing, to get off his back foot and to push off his back leg. Well, now he's taking swings in the cage and he looks like normal, right? And his moving around and being able to field a ground ball, all normal. But it's that straight line running and the having to go first to third and out the box on a double that still causes some soreness. So we're trying to continue to figure out ways if we can get him there. But I know he's going to work like crazy to get back on the field.
This has made Willie Castro's value to the team even more enormous, because he's been able to play shortstop, second, and move around the outfield. He had a home run during the Cardinals series. I still remember last year thinking that Willie's going to get DFA'd here because they're going to need room to bring this guy off the DL, and this is going to be it for Willie. He survived, stole over 30 bases, and this year he became an all-star.
Yeah.
How did you evaluate him to sign him as a minor league free agent? How did he come into your life? Really
cool story. I mean, so I knew Willie. My personal experience is back to Cleveland. We signed him out of the Dominican Republic when he was a young kid, 16, 17 years old. And after I came here to Minnesota, a year later, Cleveland had traded him in a deal to Detroit. And so he was a double-A player at the time. He was coming up to the big leagues. But I had always known about his work ethic, his makeup, his background. Super athletic, could play all over the place. He had a good year in Detroit. He had a really solid year. Then he had kind of a sophomore slump, so to speak. It was a year that didn't go as well. They ended up non-tendering him going into the offseason, and he was one of the first calls we made in free agency. I remember Jeremy Zoll, one of the assistant GMs for us, made a call to his agent that day and said, hey, we think we got a really good fit for him, and he was a target right from the get-go. In hindsight, we should have just given him the major league deal at that time because he's been tremendous. But he came in. We knew he could play a multi-position role, and we felt like he could fit all over the field. The key to Willie is he's just gotten better. He's worked harder. He's continued to find ways to get better, and I just think that gets missed sometimes. Guy gets to the big leagues. He's a good performer. How do you find ways to continue to get better? He went to center field, and it was a little shaky at the outset, but then he got better in center. He played shortstop at the front end. Yeah, there were some growing pains there too. He got better. So I just think the sky's the limit for this kid, and we still have a lot of runway ahead with him.
The thing with him too, it's hard to break out of being typecasted as a utility guy into being a everyday multi-positional player. To borrow a phrase from Rocco, which he has become. And he also there's also I don't know if it's fair or not, but it's also a belief out there that guys like him, once he starts playing for like a week or two straight, then he gets exposed.
Yeah.
He had to kind of overcome all that to get where he's at right now, right?
No doubt. And I think the cool part is, 10, 15 years ago, the front end of your beat career, saying utility player was like a 4-letter word, right? That was a bad thing. You weren't the high-end guy on the team. Now it's the opposite. Now it's, can you play multiple positions and maybe rest a guy in right field, go play shortstop for a day? That has tremendous amount of value to a team, because rather than having to go to the bench or maybe a guy that's a little lesser further down the chain, you're going to a guy who is a multi-position weapon, on a daily basis. And I think it just gives so more options to a manager and the coaching staff to think about how you're going to deploy all 26 players on the roster, rather than just say, okay, this guy can just play third, he's just a backup there. You've got an ability to impact the game in so many different ways.
All right. I want to move on to, and I touched on this in the column a couple weeks ago, about you starting to have such success with developing starting pitchers, which to me is one of the most important things in baseball.
No doubt.
Just because of the health factor, the fact that some guys pitch themselves into a relief role and just staying healthy, all those things come into play. We are seeing David Festa. We're seeing Simeon Richardson. You polished off Simeon after the trade.
Yep.
You're seeing Zeb be up here.
Yep.
You got Andrew Morris. You got Charlie Soto. You got Lewis.
CJ Culpepper, yeah.
CJ Culpepper. Lewis, the guy that throws a knuckleball.
Yep. Corey
He's a
Lewis.
Doubler. Corey
Yep,
Lewis.
Corey Lewis.
So there's guys.
Marco Raya. Those guys are all in the mix now.
Right, they're all in the mix. It took a while.
Yeah.
What was it like to get to this point?
Yeah, it's rewarding on a lot of levels, because when you're trying to implement a philosophy and an organizational structure around pitching, it takes some time. I remember in 2017 when we got here, there were some things that we recognized that there were some changes that need to be made in terms of even just some of the resources we had. And the Pollard family, to their credit, have always been supportive of investing in things off the field to help us build the pipeline of talent. And I think that goes unnoticed sometimes, with respect to the overall investment. But as we were doing that, then COVID hit, right? We had a whole year where minor league players just didn't play. It was a really tough year developmentally. We still tried to come out, 21 and 22, trying to come out of that, realizing what was it like to not have pitchers throw for a whole calendar year in games. That was hard. But then we got back on track, and you saw signs of it, even beginning of last year and then ultimately at the end of last year, as you just said, guys that you just mentioned, were really starting to trend in a direction where we knew they could be major league caliber. And then once you start this year and you look down and you see 5, 6, 7 guys that you think could be major league pitchers, not just in the future, but now, that's a really good sign, hopefully, for the long-term future of our team.
Right, and some of those guys may end up being relievers. I mean, that's just a fact of life. Connor Prielipp, I'm predicting now that he will be in your bullpen next year.
Yeah, it's not crazy. I mean, Connor's a kid who had tremendous stuff coming out of college. He dealt with an elbow injury right away and has had a tough time coming back from it. He had a second injury to that same elbow. He's got awesome stuff. When you have a 2-pitch mix like he does, that fastball, that slider, and you can do what he does with it, it doesn't take very long to become a big leaguer. I mean, we rode over today. Griffin Jacks is over at the Twins tent on the other side of the fair here, and he's probably one of the greater examples of how development works, right? He comes to the big leagues as a starter. He's got kind of average stuff. He figures out that maybe the 2 to 3 pitch mix is better than the 5 pitch mix for him, and now he's an elite bullpen arm that pitches toward the back end of games for us. So I think nothing's linear about pitching development, unfortunately.
No doubt.
But the good news is we have a group that's continuing to try and change what we're doing, learn, continue to try and find ways to get better.
Just some background. Connor Prielipp was out of Alabama, correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
He had Tommy John when he was in college.
Yep.
And then the Twins drafted him in the second round?
Yeah, second round.
And he was first-round talent.
Yeah, everyone had him going maybe in the top 10 to 15 picks if he had been healthy.
So before the 2023 season, I'm on the backfield at Fort Myers, and I'm watching Connor pitch. First of all, he's left-handed, and the Twins haven't developed a left-handed starter since Johan Santana. I don't know. It's been that long. All right. Second of all, this guy has the slider from hell. It was just a hellacious, heartbreaking thing on 2 planes that I was like, that's a major league ready pitch now.
No doubt.
And third, there were like 20 scouts behind. I said, and Mike Venefro was one of the scouts. I go, Mike, why are there so many scouts back here? We never see him pitch because he hasn't been healthy. So I've called Connor Prielipp the Loch Ness Monster of the Twins organization because there have been reports of his existence, but no one's really seen him. And so hopefully he finds a role as a reliever, right, so you can see him a little bit more.
Yeah, I hope he's a monster for different reasons going forward rather than Loch Ness, but because he's out there on the mound and dominating. But you're right. I mean, I think the unfortunate reality for anyone who's followed baseball across the game, injuries have been continuing to trend up, particularly with pitching. And it's been a hard thing to figure out, right, to make sure that you keep these guys on the field as much as you can. I think the real reason is an increase in velocity. You know, we're throwing balls harder than we ever have. That's starting in high school. That's starting at 12. I go see 12-year-old baseball from time to time. I see these kids. I can't believe how hard they're throwing. So I think some of it's just a natural progression of strength and conditioning and training and otherwise, but we need to manage ways to keep guys on the field more and keep them as healthy as possible. If we can keep Connor on the field, he's going to be a big impact for us.
I'm glad you brought that up because it helps me segue into another aspect of development I want to ask you about, the health standpoint. Derek, pitchers we got more max effort pitchers than ever.
Yep.
They're going to drive line to maximize their abilities. And I'm not dissing drive line. They've done some great stuff. Caleb threw a ball there and throw 97.
Yeah, no doubt.
Went to drive line.
No doubt.
That is rather remarkable to me. But I was looking at something. I was doing some research, and the start of May of this year, 80% of players on the injury list were pitchers.
Yeah.
80%.
Yeah.
I was amazed at that number.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, there was a stretch last year where the Tampa Bay Rays had 14 Tommy John surgeries.
It was crazy. Crazy.
So what is the health component now? Are we just resigned to the fact that guys are going to blow out and they're going to have to be repaired and we just have to move forward? Or are we trying to find ways to maximize their efforts while maximizing their health?
Yeah, well, I think what you just said, the last part you said is exactly what we're attempting to do, which is try and find an intersection between quality of stuff, which we know gets hitters out, and then keeping them on the field and healthy. And it's hard to push-pull on both of those. I mean, the reality is when you watch playoff baseball now, I don't think you see a pitch below 95, right? I mean, there's certainly not a fastball below 95, and then you see sliders at 91, 92, 93 miles an hour. So to win in the postseason and to win the World Series, which is ultimately our goal when we wake up every day, you know you're going to need elite stuff in the postseason. Right. And with the way the postseason schedule works, you have a lot more off days. You have time to rest pitchers. You don't use as many pitchers. So the reality is these guys are ready to go. They're fresh. They throw harder, and the stuff plays. We know that for every mile an hour lost on a fastball, we know what the numbers are on the other end in terms of the batter performance, and it's not good, right? So we have to figure out the intersection between keeping a guy on the field as much as possible, but also acknowledging that stuff is going to need to be there when we play October baseball and hopefully find a way to lift that trophy.
I believe the average Major League fastball now is 94.7.
I think that's right. Somewhere right around there sounds right.
94.7 miles an hour. That's because when I was watching baseball as a kid in the 70s, it was probably 90, 91. I think a guy threw 90, you're like, oh, man, he's got a big fastball.
Yeah, I think there was – I saw a stat recently when we first started tracking velocity of all the pitches with all these systems you can watch them on now back in the big – I think it was around 2008 when we first had Pitch FX and then became TrackMan and all that. There was something like 800 breaking balls that were above 90 miles an hour. Now we see like 10 to 15,000 every season, right? It's a crazy number. I mean, the multiple there in just over 10, 12 years is just wild to think about.
Right. All right. I can't let this subject just go out there without addressing it. I want to ask you this.
Yeah.
I believe there is a chunk of the fan base here who believes if you win a division or you make the playoffs as a wild card, or unfortunately by some, misfortune that you don't make the playoffs, that the reason that you guys didn't go farther is because of the restrictions that you were given with the payroll. Now, you don't sign the checks. You are given marching orders. You have to execute those orders. How do you square out what you have been faced financially with trying to push this program forward another step and kind of doing a little bit this and the
Yeah, listen, payroll's always a part of the conversation in Major League Baseball, right? The gap in football between the lowest payroll and the highest payroll is very small. It's true in basketball. It's true in hockey, right? We're not a salary cap floor, and there's a salary cap and a floor sport. And so there's a large gap. In every market in baseball, there's going to be some discussion about payroll, whether there could be more, whether, ultimately you're past your limits. I will say this, that ever since I've gotten here with the Pohlad family, we've invested across all areas of our operations in a way that doesn't just mean Major League payroll, right? And I get that we always want to think that just putting more money into the payroll is ultimately what's going to lead to us winning more. And that's just the reality is that's not always true. There are some limitations in every market. Market size plays a role in that. And we've really pushed our payrolls the last couple of years. We did make some adjustments downward this year, reflective of a lot of things that were going on, in our market ultimately. But I will say this, that there's a lot of investment off the field that's trying to build what we believe is a sustainable winner, one that will invest in player development and scouting in areas and operations that allow for Zebby Matthews and David Festa and other guys to contribute to the team. It's not just about that one free agent more that's ultimately going to get us there. And I fundamentally believe we have a good core of players, a good process, good system that hopefully will give us a chance to win over a long period of time.
I will attest to this. My first years on the beat, which was 1998, I knew every person in the organization. I could say hello to everyone from Rob Anthony to Brad Stile to Jack Goyne and everybody. I knew who everybody was and what they did. I don't recognize half your employees now.
Oh, you're not on the beat anymore. You never come around anymore.
I see these kids are like 23 years old working in baseball research. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? They're wearing like orange shoes and got their hair purple. And like, who are these people? So I know you guys have built out the baseball operation.
I think you look good in purple hair.
No, thanks.
I think we mix that in at some point.
It's better than white. So, but I want to.
But it's grown for sure, and it has across all of baseball. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, when you look at it, and a lot of it's around resources for players. Getting back to the development piece, is when you see a college program now, and you're at one of the preeminent college programs. Every one of them's got a pitching lab. Every one of them's got a hitting lab. Every one of them's trying to continue to develop players. So understanding the data and the analytics, the players come into our system expecting that there's a lot of this information even before they get there. So I think it's now just understanding and adjusting. But I will say this, never losing the human element, right? Our coaches coach, and our players, we need to get to know them personally and understand what makes them tick and find a way to give them the resources they need to become the best players they can be. That's both coaching and some data and analytics and finding a way to blend all of it together.
Right. Gotcha. I will say this, too. Baseball is the only sport in which there's small market and large market teams. 2023, last year, I believe the New York Mets had a payroll nearly $200 million more than the Twins.
Yeah.
I believe that's in the ballpark. Right. And that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous disparity that needs to be addressed. At the same time, the teams that spend all the money don't always win. Does it help? It sure in the hell does.
Sure.
But you see teams like the Twins, the Diamondbacks, who played for the World Series. The Diamondbacks didn't have that huge of a payroll.
Yep.
Moderate. I think the Rangers spent a little bit of money.
Yeah, Rangers spent. Yeah, they were on the top end.
So, but two wildcard teams making the World Series.
Totally.
So it's totally the Rays have played in 2 words.
No
World
doubt.
Series.
No doubt.
I get that. Good baseball decisions rule. But my personal opinion is that after everything that happened last year, the run you guys went on, going into the playoffs with Sonny Gray and Pablo Lopez.
Yep.
And winning a playoff series for the first time in whoever can remember was such a great thing that the momentum was lost when you guys had to adjust the payroll. So I'm here asking you now, for all these people, are you going to go into Joe Pollard's office and pound your fist on the table and say, damn it, we need to return the payroll to what it was 2 years ago because we want to push this thing forward?
Lavelle's watched too many movies about how this thing goes down, right? So I would say, honestly, it's an ongoing conversation always, right? We invest in, like I said, the areas off the field as well. We'll continue to have that conversation with Jim Pollard, Joe Pollard, and the whole family. We continue to have this dialogue every offseason. Now, will there be limits to everything? There are. And there are, as you just said, in every other market too, right? If the Mets were more than whatever you said over where we were last year, we were at a record high payroll ourselves last year. So there's ebb and flow. As you said, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success. And we're going to work within the parameters we have to build the team that I believe every one of you can be proud of, that will continue to grow, that will sustain a level of success that Twins fans will be proud of.
And owners can make this a little easier by going to an NFL model, because I think so 25 to 30% of local TV revenues are shared.
Yeah.
They need to push that boy to 100%, like the NFL does. Baseball needs socialism, okay? So these guys need to understand that we need all these teams. They need someone to play, and everybody has a hand in it. So they need to equally split local revenue. That would, I think, be not an official salary cap, but it would slow the roll of the Yankees and the Mets, which agents don't want to hear.
Yeah, I get you.
But it's the disparities. When teams have a $200 million payroll more than others, something with the financial structure needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, I think every time there's a collective bargaining agreement and there's an opportunity to talk back through this, that's where the league and the union get together. There's disparity in local revenues, as you just said, right? And some of it's owed to TV deals in different markets, and those create different revenue streams. So it's part of our business. We don't focus a lot of our attention on that because that's not in our control on a daily basis. We want to control the controllables and ultimately figure out ways to make our team as good as we can. And hopefully there's a way to simplify the system in a way that allows for a little bit more parity over time, and maybe that'll come in the next agreement along the way.
Do you have an idea what your TV structure is going to be for next year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do know this. It's been complicated, obviously, on a host of levels. I'm sure everyone out there, much like me, at my house, we went a stretch of time where I couldn't watch Twins baseball games at home, which was a very bizarre experience, but trying to figure out how to access it was not fun for anybody, and we know that. The reality is this isn't unique to just the Minnesota market, as many know, right? This has happened in multiple cities across the country and multiple markets. I do believe because of what has transpired this year, because of what we learned through that process, ultimately what Joe Polat, Dave St. Peter, and others have played a meaningful role in trying to navigate over the course of time, that we will have a path next year that will ensure that the types of issues we dealt with this year are not going to be part of the equation. Now, what it actually looks like, I don't think we know yet. I think there's, quite frankly, some questions still as to what is going to happen league-wide, what's going to happen with the deals in other cities. Ultimately, is there a possibility to merge some teams together to be part of another group? Those types of things could happen. Right. We just won't know that yet until we get to the fall.
There was an attempt. It was called Victory Sports. It was before you were here.
I've heard.
And that didn't go very well. Dave St. Peter actually had letterhead with Victory Sports, and at the bottom was a catchphrase. Without victory, there is no success. Victory Sports lasted 2 years.
Yeah, I mean,
so there was not success.
Well, I think what you're talking to, though, is the challenge and the dynamic around creating something that works and is sustainable and works for all the clubs. So, obviously the Timberwolves, the Wild, others, we're all part of the Bally's group here locally. Everyone's dealing with this to some degree, and hopefully we can get a solution that will work for the long term this cycle. But I know for sure whatever short-term solution we have next year will be better than where we were this year.
By the way, did you grow up a Red Sox fan?
Yeah.
I
grew up just outside of the Boston area.
Yeah, I did. All right, who was your favorite Red Sox player?
It's funny. I loved to catch as a kid, and for those who remember this, Tony Pena used to stick his leg out as a catcher, right? It was like he was on a knee way before it was, fashionable to be on a knee catching in the big leagues, but I always used to try and do that with my leg out, and I loved to catch as a kid, so that's the one that always pops to mind immediately.
He's quite a character, because he managed the Rose for a few years.
He did, yeah.
I was in their clubhouse a couple of times when, in order, after a bad loss, he'd go into the shower with his full uniform and cleats on and shower with the guys just to do something goofy.
Just to break it up a little bit.
Yeah. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he was a good quote, too. So that's the guy you picked there.
I'm sure.
So do you have any roster news for us today? I got to imagine Brooks Lee's ready to come back.
Yeah, Brooks is tracking in a good direction, and I think that we want to make sure that, as he gets through, he dealt with the back injury to start the year. He came back, and he's in a good spot from that. That shoulder inflammation did cost him some time there where he wasn't at 100%. The last thing we want to do is say, okay, you played a game or two in AAA, we're good, let's just roll. We want to see how he responds, get a couple more games under his belt.
Gotcha.
But he's really close to being part of a factor here for the big league team.
I know you can't agree or disagree with this, but Julian, my man, the guy's got such a great bat. But that error yesterday was a tough one.
It was tough.
It was going to be a close play.
Yep.
I get that. But I saw it at St. Paul this year, and I saw it up here. He doesn't run hard out of the box, and it's cost him a couple times. The dribbler to third base, he didn't come out of the box running hard. He's bumming me out, man, because I like that bat.
Yeah.
I love his bat a lot. So we got to get him calibrated where he's going gung-ho all the time.
Yeah, I would say for Eddie, some of it too is he's not overly fast, right? That's not part of his game, right? So as he's getting out of the box, he might not get to top speed the way some other guys do. Okay. But the defensive side yesterday, it was just he felt that more than anybody in that clubhouse post-game, right? He felt like he let everyone down. And so what's what I said at the beginning of this. It's all about how you respond to the adversity that determines what happens next. And I think that our guys showing up today, I know they are right now, as we speak, showing up in the clubhouse, are ready to go tonight. And got a tough matchup. Max Fried's a good pitcher. Atlanta Braves are a great team. Yep. So we just got to show up and play the type of baseball. And we did that on that road trip. We had some tough, like back-breaking losses, so to speak, in that San Diego series. And then to finish the way we did in San Diego was a testament to the kind of resiliency I think this team has.
Agreed. I forgot to ask you this. Someone wanted to ask you a question from the crowd. Are you able to take
a question?
Of course.
I'll take questions.
Who wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, for
This
sure.
guy right here, yeah.
Fire away.
Yeah, come on up. You can grab this mic right here.
Might have to click it on. Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it.
Flip it on. There you go.
I want to talk about analytics a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's overrated somewhat. I think there's too much emphasis on the righty, lefty, lefty, righty.
Pull it in a little closer. Yeah, sorry.
Too much
Just so
emphasis
everyone
on
can
the
hear.
lefty,
Yep.
righty, righty, lefty.
Yep.
We talked about Larnick and Wallner.
Yep.
Hitting Farmer for Wallner in a big spot, it's tough to watch. I mean, I'm theory, let the big dogs hunt,
Yep.
How do you play that? What do the analytics say about a pinch hitter that goes over 23?
Yeah. Yep.
How can you tell me that that's right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So yep. So I'll answer the question broadly.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks for the question. I would say this, that I think I fundamentally believe this. I think the belief externally as to how analytics are woven into the game is a little different than how it actually is. So let me give you kind of a little bit of background on that, and Lavelle could speak to this a little bit too. When Rocco, the staff, and otherwise get some of the information, they're looking at the same numbers that you could look up yourself, right? In terms of, hey, how's the guy do against this type of pitching? How's the guy do against left-handed, right-handed? How about a guy who has fastballs up in the zone a lot versus a guy who has a lot of good sliders, right? And you can get a little deeper in understanding of what a hitter's trying to do. And the pitchers are constantly trying to learn that stuff too, right? So they spend a lot of time learning it. They spend a lot of time thinking about it. And in aggregate over the course of the season, Rocco has to make calls in those moments around what's informed. It's not a data-driven decision. It's a data-informed opinion, right, beforehand, because he's not looking at that sheet in-game. He's making some decisions before the game that, hey, if I need to get contact here in this situation, I feel like this is going to give us a better chance to maybe get a ball to the outfield versus a left-on-left situation that has maybe a real high strikeout likelihood, right? That's the decision. When you talk to Tom Kelly or you talk to anyone else who's been managing for a long time, they say they made the same decisions, at some point in their careers. It was just informed by a little less information because they didn't have it, right? And so ultimately, I don't think it's changed that much. We don't, prescribe, hey, do this in this situation. I've never written a lineup in my life. I'll never write a lineup in my life. It's not my job. Ultimately, the coaches and the staff and the manager need to make a decision in those moments as to how best to deploy the group. It didn't work out yesterday for sure. No question about it. But ultimately, when, hitting Royce for Larnick earlier in the game for that left-right matchup, those types of things, over the course of a season, you hope make up a big gap over the course of the year. Sometimes they don't work out, and those are the tough calls that managers have to live with. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
Let me amplify that question because he asked, how does a base outlet left-handed hitter learn how to hit left-handed
how to hit
pitching
lefties, right?
without facing lefties?
Right. So how does it develop?
I'm there with Larnick.
Yep.
Because
no
Larnick
doubt.
has dropped his strikeout rate significantly this year,
Yep.
and I think he deserves some shots against left-handed pitchers.
No doubt. And I think there's been times in games in certain situations where they do end up playing, ultimately not having that matchup switch. But ultimately, at the same time, on the flip side, you're trying to, especially when you're in a situation like we are now where it's this close to a playoff spot, every little inch matters, right? So when you're making a decision that might be in long-term view, it's a little easier to do when you're maybe 10 games under 500 than in this current situation. Rock needs to make that call. It's a tough call for him every night. Ultimately, I trust that he and the staff and otherwise are trying to put these players in the best position to succeed as they can.
And
thank you for the question.
Unfortunately, this game is managed differently than it was 10, 15 years ago. Look how managers run bullpens during games now. Yeah. Second time through the order, the starter's out a lot of times.
Yep.
They're running through. They had to put a cap on extra innings and put a runner at second because he couldn't afford having to make 13, 14-inning games where they'd run out of pitchers. Basically, they had to stop managers against themselves.
To some degree.
I could look at it that way, or you could say it's because the way games being managed today.
That's true. I also think, we just talked for a while about injuries, right? And I think that that's not minimized. If you're going to roll out throwing as hard as the guys do, and they're trying to throw more pitches, then ultimately they might increase their injury risk, and now more of those guys are on the IL. So it's a tough balance. I get that. We don't have a perfect solution for it. I do think some of the rule changes that have been implemented the last couple of years to help make the starter a little bit more prominent, to ultimately keep games moving fast, to limit the usage of too many relievers in a game, 3-batter minimum, things like that, I think are ultimately healthy for our game.
I do think the extra inning rules have cut down on the number of times where a guy has went out there and pitched 2 out of 3 good innings out of the bullpen to save his staff and then gets sent down right after the game.
It definitely does that. It definitely does that. And I also think the extra inning rule, it's interesting what fan feedback, you get all kinds of surveying and fan feedback. I don't know there's many people that like 16, 17-inning games, with all due respect. Even if you're a diehard baseball fan, sitting there at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning to watch that last out, it's usually not a particularly full stadium at that point. So I think in some ways that allowed for us to maybe get the games moving a little more quickly.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, please, around of applause for Derek Falvey.
Thank you.
President of Baseball Operations. Derek, thanks a lot for joining us today at the fair.
Well,
hope we can do this going forward.
For sure. I just want to say thank you to all of you. I mean, you're sitting here, you're listening to us talk about Twins baseball. I just appreciate your passion for it, and we love you all your support. So thank you. Appreciate it.